It's mad, bad and dangerous to know. Today I am driving the TVR Cerbera, my first ever experience of the legendary Blackpool rocket. Now, if you're of a certain age like myself, you may have been inspired as a young man by a certain Jeremy Clarkson video, in which he did a huge drag race of all of the fastest cars of the day. And the car which won that race by some considerable margin was a Cerbera. Now, there are plenty of rumours as to quite how stock that Cerbera was, and knowing the way TVR ran things, I would suspect the answer is not in the least. But the Cerbera is a legendary car for many other reasons. I mean, for a start, just look at it. It's absolutely bonkers. It's hard to think that this is a shape that is over 25 years old, but it's just such an imposing thing. I've been very lucky in my career to look at and drive some incredible vehicles, but even still, when this bold yellow shape pulled into the driveway today, I couldn't help but gawp at it. It's such a fabulous looking thing. Now, the truth of it is that the Cerbera is in many ways my least favourite TVR, for the simple reason that this roof doesn't come off, and I really do like cars where the roof pops off, and so for that reason the Tuscan was probably always the one for me. And I've driven a few Tuscans, including on the channel, and really like them. There is still just something about the Cerbera that appeals though. I mean, you wouldn't you? It's absolutely bananas, not just on the outside but on the inside as well. This crazy dash layout actually kind of works. They beat Ferrari to having buttons on the steering wheel by a clear decade, and this wheel actually feels great in the hand, even though when you look at it you think it's going to be like wrestling some kind of octopus. There's a little vent here for the air conditioning, which shockingly works, but on the wheel you've got wash and wipe, you've got headlights, and you've got the horn as well. The indicator stalk is this simple piece of metal on the side here. Note that it's on the right hand side, very JDM. You sit impossibly low in this car, yet you still have a pretty good view of that amazing long bonnet. This really is a car that feels like it's about 80% bonnet, 20% cabin. Unusually for a TVR, this is also a four-seater, although strictly speaking it is a 3+1 in TVR parlance. Now, the good thing about this is that the boss of the time, Peter Wheeler, was a very tall man, and therefore if you're looking for a classic British sports car that you can enjoy and you are, say, 6'5", you'll be alright in one of these. I fortunately am not, but even still, I've got a pretty decent view out. You'd expect this to be just as bad as, say, the XJ220 that I drove, but in fact it is quite a bit better. That's not difficult though, the Jag is absolutely awful. Now, this car is a Speed 6 engine variant. The Cerbera was available with a couple of different engine choices, a few sizes of V8 and the 4-litre Speed 6. Now, both of those have their own problems, and if you're looking at buying a nice, easy, trouble-free, low-maintenance car, just look elsewhere. The Cerbera was in production until about 2003, and in typical TVR tradition, later cars are generally better. But if you do want to buy one, I would suggest you do what this car's owner Ross did, and basically buy on condition rather than specification. There are so few of these things that it's not particularly easy to be that picky about what you get. This particular car he knew, and he knew the places that had worked on it, the people that had owned it, and I have to say it is in remarkably good condition. In fact, it's one of the best conditioned TVRs I've ever seen. That being said, there's still quite a few typical TVR things about it. The shut lines are all over the place, and in fact the gap between the boot and the rear screen is hilariously large. You'd find kids' footballs and things in there. It's gargantuan. I mean, they just did not care. But it's not a car about details, it's a big, shouty animal of a thing. The gearbox in this is the exact same Borg-Warner box that you'll find in things like the Tuscan, the Temora, etc., and it's an absolute delight to use. There's only 5 ratios, they are spaced fairly wide, and In typical TVR fashion, the gear lever is already roasting hot. The Speed 6 is a lump which I've found really does require revs to get the very best out of it. It produces allegedly about 360 horsepower, and it doesn't feel slow in this car. The Cerbera, as with all TVRs, is extremely lightweight. In the real world, you're talking a sub 1100 kilo car. Although when it comes to power figures, I think TVR are possibly even worse than the Italians. Of all of the cars that I've driven, they never quite feel like they claim power, but you certainly wouldn't call them slow. The Cerbera is actually a surprisingly easy car to drive. Much like a lot of the other Trevors that I've driven, it looks angry and shouty and hardcore, but the way it's set up is actually much more classic British roadster. Even though the car's owner describes it as being fairly harsh, riding on Nitron suspension, as do most of them now, it's not really that harsh. The indicators are frustratingly difficult to use. Trying to get them to stop what they're doing is nearly impossible. I'm going left, then I'm going right, then I'm going left, then I'm going right. Some of the stuff TVR did is amazing and properly brilliant, and I really admire them for their commitment to being individual. You really don't recognise much, if almost nothing, in this car from other manufacturers. But occasionally I do think that it wouldn't have killed them to use a few more conventional things. You rev the car out and she sounds sweet. This one is actually fairly restrained for a TVR. This car has an ACT Sports exhaust. The Speedo occasionally drops away like you'd expect any old British car to, but you can actually get into a bit of a rhythm with it. What I really love about this car, and it's something that shocks me every time I get into a TVR, is the steering. It's so good. You can feel every single bit of the road, and it's really, truly alive. So even though this is a car which, if you disrespect it, it will kill you just for fun, it does talk to you. You know, it's very much like it's a sensible murderer. You know, if you don't upset it, it won't kill you without a reason. It doesn't need a lot of a reason to do it, but you do have to give it one. Throttle is nice and responsive. Now, some of the other options you could choose for the Cerbera were the 4.2 V8, the 4.5 V8, and then later in the car's life they also did a lightweight body option. In theory, the most desirable of all specs would be a 4.5 lightweight body option with a Red Rose engine spec and all this sort of stuff, but the thing is, so few of the cars are original now, you really do have to just go on a car-by-car basis. Just buy what seems decent. That's the best advice that I can possibly give you. There's plenty of burble on the overrun. The gear lever is really warm. I have seen pictures of people that take their TVRs on long road trips, and you can see them because they wear one glove. The Speed 6 engine in the Cerbera does suffer from the exact same problems as in all other cars. Now, opinions do vary as to how necessary a rebuild on these is, but if I was looking at buying one, I think I would be looking for a car that had one of those in the history. Some of the very later cars and the 3.6s, like the Tamoras, maybe you're going to be a little luckier, but the fact of the matter is that the Speed 6 was just not a durable power plant from the off. It is, however, not at all short of character. At higher speeds, the chassis really does start to move about and the whole car comes alive. The last thing I drove down this road was a pretty modern 911, and you simply can't treat this car the same way. It's just not going to take it. The chassis is nowhere near as stiff as the 911s, and you really do notice it. That being said, you can get into a rhythm with the car. It is proper old school, and it's one of those very few cars where the expectations that you get from the looks of it are matched entirely by the driving experience. And you know what? This drives a lot better than I thought it might. Doing this kind of thing, I really wasn't looking forward to it. I'll be totally honest. I thought, oh, Cerbera down a tight, twisty, narrow road, oh, it's going to be horrible. Actually, it loves it. I suppose I shouldn't be surprised, because all the other TVRs I've driven have been a real pleasant experience. Sure, if you stand and look at it, you'll see all the million different problems, and all the way TVR were a bit lazy, and there's hilarious things like there's little strips of fur in the front that stop the bonnet from rubbing the bodywork's paint to pieces and stuff like that. But you know what? If you're going to buy a TVR, you just got to deal with that kind of stuff. It's part of the territory. It's part of the ownership experience. And if this car is anything, it is an experience. Thanks for watching. Big thanks to the owner, Ross, for bringing this to me. Hope you've enjoyed watching. Please like, comment below, subscribe if you haven't already. See you for the next one. Bye-bye.